And with all that on our post-championship plates, welcome to Inside This Week, opening edition of Big Ten Today, presented by Gatorade. Rick Pizzo, Howard Griffith. We'll get to more on Matt Campbell, officially introduced at Penn State, coming up in just a bit. But the championship win by the Indiana Hoosiers Saturday night over then number 1 Ohio State continues to resonate throughout the college football world.
It really does. And you just think about the way they were able to do it, dominating on the defensive side, making plays, particularly at the defensive line position, getting after the quarterback, never allowing him to be comfortable in the pocket. Indiana has been doing this the entire year, and there was no reason to think that they would not be able to get it done in the Big Ten championship game.
That result in the entire body of work for both Indiana and Ohio State, also showing the College Football Playoff Committee just how strong the league was in 2025. And that is our big story. Indiana set to continue its storybook season in Pasadena. The number 1 seed Hoosiers are set to face either Oklahoma or Alabama in a Rose Bowl CFP quarterfinal. Number 2 Ohio State, dropping just 1 spot after that loss, will kick off its defense of the CFP title at a Cotton Bowl quarter against the winner of a first-round game between Texas A&M and Miami. Oregon is the number 5 seed and plays the first ever playoff game at Autzen on December 20th against James Madison. Let's hear from the head coaches of the top 2 seeds as they officially begin their playoff prep.
I figured we'd be number 1, and the only question I had is what the rest of the seating would look like and what our matchup would be. So I figured Jeff would give me that.
What was your reaction to the overall bracket?
Well, we know who we'll play, the winner of, and we've got 3.5 weeks. Obviously, it's a long time. Have a team meeting tomorrow and set a path. And you got teams in there. Everybody's capable, and great teams. You got to play well.
There's a lot to go through, and I think when you have a loss, it certainly, allows you an opportunity to really dive deeper into things, and you look at things that you are making assumptions on that you feel like are the right things to do, and then you go into a game like that and it doesn't work, and so you got to get those things fixed. And then the issues that are always there certainly come to the surface. So we'll look at all those things, and that's the thing. After a loss, you got to get them fixed. You got to get them addressed.
Time now for your Gatorade Big Stat, taking a closer look at the numbers behind the Big Ten's Big Three, each of whom is making a second straight CFP playoff appearance in the field of 12. Indiana, still unbeaten. Ohio State, again, hoping to use a late loss as CFP motivation. And Oregon at home, sweet home for its playoff opener. Yogi Roth was in Eugene this past weekend and has much more on the Ducks.
The 2025 CFP bracket is set, and the Oregon Ducks will be hosting the first round against James Madison. They're a 5 seed going out against a 12 seed. Talk to Dan Lanning about it. He knows how excited this community is for this opportunity to play for the CFP and take a run at potentially the national championship. He said immediately he's going to go right to the film and study James Madison. He knows how talented Coach Chesney's squad is. Coach Chesney, of course, will be formally introduced as UCLA's head coach this week. With that said, Dan Lanning is also going to lean on his past experiences in the college football playoff. Remember last year, it's 25 days in between games from the Big Ten title to the Rose Bowl. This year, it'll be 21 days. He says he'll tweak the schedule just a little bit to make sure his team is primed and peaking for this first round matchup. Also, the time off will allow his team to get healthy. Now, when I look at this team schematically, personnel-wise, I really believe they have a chance to make a run at the entire thing. The way they are seeded, who their potential opponents will be, they can get past round 1. Look out, Texas Tech, we'll see where that game will be, and then who knows what the Ducks can do. When healthy, I think they're one of the most formidable teams in the country. Also flying a little bit under the radar when you take a look at people around the country projecting the Oregon Ducks. So expect them to be at full strength as they host their first playoff game ever.
Yogi, thank you. Let's work our way through the brackets and the potential matchups for each team, starting with number 1, Indiana. You'll love the fact that you're number 1. It's amazing that you get to go out to Pasadena, continue this season at the Rose Bowl. Listen, every challenge that has been in front of Indiana, they have met it and they have surpassed it. they'll face a big-time challenge because whether they play Oklahoma or they play Alabama, they're going to match up with one of the most physical teams in the country.
And that's not going to scare them when you think about this Indiana team. I mentioned the defensive line earlier. This is a group that's really been physical the entire year, creating those negative plays. So I don't think that there will be any apprehension from them, and I believe that they'll be able to rise to the challenge there. But when you look at this Indiana team, they have always met the challenge each and every week. And I know they've got a delay, but you have to believe after 2 years of really watching Coach Sig and the way his teams and coaching staffs operate that they'll have them at peak performance ready to go for that matchup. And he will set up some different things throughout the week to make sure, the coming weeks, to make sure that they are properly prepared. So you don't think about that, whether or not they'll be ready. They're going to have a great challenge in front of them no matter what, but they will absolutely be prepared for the challenge.
3 H's to worry about, according to Curt Cignetti: healthy, hungry, and humble. The health question relates to Omar Cooper, who left early in that Big Ten championship game, did not return. Charlie Becker did an amazing job with a career-high 126, replacing Cooper as the second receiver behind Elijah Surratt. And don't question Sig getting this team humble and hungry before that Rose Bowl matchup against either Alabama or Oklahoma, two teams who have struggled offensively as of late. That should be good news for the Indiana defense. As for Ohio State, they drop, but they only drop to be the number 2 seed. And when you start to think about potential matchups for Ohio State, two teams in Miami and A&M that were questionable late in the year. A&M with a loss, dropping them all the way to 7. Miami, one of the last, if not the last team to get into the college football playoff bracket. And again, Ryan Day, like last year with the loss to Michigan, gets to use a late loss as motivation for his team heading into the most important tournament of all.
They've been there before. They understand the pain and the anguish that goes through losing a game like this, of this magnitude on the Big Ten championship stage, and they'll be able to bounce back because they know they've already done it when you talk about in previous years. So they'll be motivated without a doubt, and sometimes you need a little chink in the armor to get you back focused, and I think this is a team that's going to be ready to go, no doubt about it. Once again, a coaching staff that will have his players ready. You've got an offensive coordinator in Brian Hartline who's taking his next job, so he'll have to be able to manage that as well. But obviously, having your head coach being a play caller, we will make sure that this team is ready to go from an offensive standpoint.
And it's not as if Ohio State laid an egg or got blown out in their championship game like Alabama did in their SEC championship game matchup with Georgia. This was tight throughout. A 27-yard missed field goal was potentially the difference between seeing this game go to overtime and Indiana winning its first Big Ten title since 1967. Oregon does have to play in the first round. But as we were starting to look ahead to all the potential projections, we thought to ourselves, before the committee released this bracket, boy, the number 5 seed is a prime spot because after Virginia got upset by Duke on Saturday night, you knew James Madison was going to be, in all respect to James Madison, Oregon at home will be a monster favorite. And then you play a Texas Tech team in the quarterfinal. I think both of those potential matchups are terrific for the Oregon Ducks.
And think about this. These Oregon Ducks can get healthy as well. And I know they've got to get ready to go, but it's a home game for them, and they'll be able to get prepared. And this is when you start to talk about rosters, you look at Indiana, Ohio State, and now Oregon, the teams that are playing. Oregon can have a claim that they have one of the most talented rosters in all of this 12-team field. So they'll be ready to go, too. And again, we're talking about coaches who do a great job of pressing all the right buttons to get the most out of their team. Coach Lanning has done that, and he's proven it, so they'll be ready to go.
Unbelievable performance by Oregon in last year's Big Ten title game, winning the Big Ten championship in their first year inside the league. Obviously didn't have the chance to do that again, but you point out the health. They have been so banged up, especially at that wide receiver position, and still went on that great run after losing at home to Indiana. Those guys, hopefully, Bryant, Moore, will be healthy and back for this Oregon offense. Let's transition to what Saturday night did for the Big Ten, specifically for Indiana, looking ahead to the college football playoff. Yes, they beat Ohio State, but I think that everything that took place during the year didn't change people's view of Indiana as much as Saturday night did. I know they went to Eugene and they beat Oregon. They posted a couple of amazing comeback wins over Iowa, that memorable catch by Cooper in the end zone to beat Penn State. But I believe it was Saturday night standing toe-to-toe with Ohio State, the team that was considered by almost everybody to be the best in the country, and to come out on top. As much as SIG has changed the perspective of everything that Indiana football has been, is, and will be, to me, Saturday night was the watershed moment that changes it outside of the Big Ten as well.
Could you make it a signature win of all the wins he's had? Right?
Well,
I talk about what the national perspective would be for
I think among
Indiana.
all the wins, it is the most signature, and I think it does this too, Howard. I'll say that I had a lot of folks texting me, friends who were at this game, and they said, don't you think this is one of the great coaching jobs in all of college football? I said, no. I think it is one of the great coaching jobs in the history of sports, regardless of sport, venue, or level. This is miracle on ice stuff, except you didn't have to beat one nemesis. You beat all of them over the course of the last 2 years, things that had never been even thought to be possible in Indiana football history.
And let's look at it this way. When you talk about Indiana, right, you talk about Larry Bird, right, and obviously a long storied career. Obviously, you talk about Peyton Manning and what he has done in Indianapolis and Indiana and what he did for sports there. You can also make the argument that this Indiana team, the last 2 years, is there a better story?
No.
It can't be. And we talk about the coaching, the way this has really played out. It really has, I think, fans from coast to coast really scratching their heads to figure out what is it, how did they do it? And I think athletic departments are doing that as well, because it has been remarkable what he was able to do to be able to get these players to play at the level. You talk about of the 3 teams in the Big Ten, you talk about rosters. Of the 3 that are playing in the championship or for the national championship, they would probably say they have the 3rd best roster out there when it comes to recruiting evaluations. But when you look at the team, it is unquestioned that the way they play together at a high level each and every week and what this coaching staff has done has just been unbelievable.
Howard, if I had sat here before SIG coached his first game and told you that on December 7th, 2025, Indiana's going to be unbeaten. They're going to be the #1 seed in the college football playoff. And a team in the same state just down the road in Notre Dame is going to be left out of that college football playoff bracket and then turn down any impending bowl invitation outside of the CFP. You probably would have asked our executive board here at the Big Ten Network to have me removed, have my badge taken away, and to get a new host in.
Yes, yes, it's one of those things, but it just shows you. I think we all knew that when the transfer portal came about, that it was going to have significant changes. We all talked about just how quickly the fortunes of a team could change because of going into the portal. But the way they have managed the portal, the way have they missed? I can't tell.
Not on a single guy that I can tell you about.
And then you look at, and then for me as well, just doing the recruiting, national recruiting show last week for us, you look at, I believe it's 7 4-star players that they signed. I mean, when was the last time they had 7 4-stars in consecutive years? Yeah, you put them all together.
You have to put probably 12 years together to make that happen.
But that's what it's been that quick. And it's really the mindset of the players, the mindset of the coaches of setting the standard. The standard is the standard. And as much as we want to believe it's got to be something else, it really isn't. They believe in the person in the front of the room, and they believe in one another.
They also believe in the guy under center who's just a couple of days away from going to New York City and winning the Heisman Trophy. As if we could throw any other unbelievable storylines. I can guarantee you this, no matter what questions he is asked, he is going to find his one shot, look directly in the camera, and give you an inspirational speech, the likes of which has had no match. All right, much more on all of these CFP storylines to come, including Oregon's coordinator dilemma. How do the Ducks handle not 1 but 2 play callers pulling double duty as head coaches in waiting? Plus, there's no more waiting in State College, where Matt Campbell was officially introduced Monday. We hear from Penn State's brand new head man right after this. After a search that lasted nearly 2 months and offered more drama than Season 5 of Stranger Things, Penn State has found its leading man. Matt Campbell officially introduced as the Nittany Lions head football coach Monday, ending a story that began with the dismissal of James Franklin in mid-October. From Toledo to Iowa State, Campbell has done nothing but win in his coaching career and sees no reason for that to change now.
I always said you want to be around great people. You want to, if we're going to lead, we want to lead with the best. It was one conversation with Pat and one conversation with Neil. I knew what their demand is, and they wanted to be the best for the right reasons. And then I think the last piece of it is, what do you want to stand for? And I think the hard thing for me ever wanting to leave Iowa State at times and getting close, but saying, you know what, it's just not the right time, is I never wanted to be that coach that was, oh man, I'm going to jump from job to job. Like if we were ever to leave Iowa State, I wanted to go somewhere and I wanted to finish my career and I wanted to stand for something that's bigger than Matt Campbell. It's not about me, but about the players and represents something bigger than myself. And I found that. And I couldn't be more humbled and more grateful for that opportunity.
We all know the biggest knock on James Franklin's tenure was that his team didn't win their biggest games. While at Penn State, Franklin was 4-21 against top 10 opponents, claimed just one win in 16 tries against top 5 opposition. Now, to be fair, the sample size is much smaller for Matt Campbell during his time at Iowa State in those top 10 games, though his winning percentage in comparable situations is significantly higher. Welcome you back into our Big Ten Today set. Rick Pizzo with Howard Griffith. It took a while, but I think you and I both agree that at the end of the day, this is a very good hire for Penn State, based not only on Campbell's previous success at Iowa State, at Toledo, but at the way that he appears to be approaching the job in State College.
Yeah, I think when you watch his career and you look back and see how he got to where he is, he's really had an opportunity to really show who he is as a head football coach and what he's going to expect. The fact of the matter is he's had many opportunities, as he's talked about and mentioned, to go other places, but chose to stay at Iowa State because it just wasn't right, not only for him, but not right for the family as well. So when you think about how he got to Penn State, I think it's an outstanding hire. The process is what it is, but they can close the door on that. I believe they have a person in place now, along with Terry Smith, that really, I think, can take the program back to try to gain some more momentum that I thought that they had lost after signing day.
I'm glad you bring up Terry Smith, because that was a focal point of this press conference. Matt Campbell said it was a focal point of his decision that he had told Pat Kraft, I really want Terry Smith on my staff. They've known each other since Smith was a high school coach at Gateway, and Matt Campbell recruited that high school while he was at Toledo. And Pat Kraft said he stayed in communication with Terry Smith throughout this entire process, and that it was actually, quote, according to Kraft, easy to get Terry back as the associate head coach. This is a huge get for Matt Campbell in this program.
Yeah, really huge get. Not only do you bring the alums, bring them back into the fold if they were, upset about different things that were going on about him not getting the job, but you also bring in a like-minded assistant coach. So now that he can go, because remember, Coach Smith has had a huge impact on that roster. He's had his hand in the recruitment of most of the players that are on the current roster at Penn State. That's going to be significant for particularly moving forward, because he can now go to those recruits and as he starts to recruit the current roster, this guy's like me. And all you need to do is listen to him for 10 minutes. That's what I said to you after the press conference. They are aligned. And to be able to have your coaching staff that are aligned is an important piece, because they have to hit the ground running. They have to catch back up with the recruiting. They have to get the portal correct. And I think they have two guys that are going to be a significant impact on what's going to happen.
I'm sure Matt Campbell also looked at Penn State's 2026 schedule, which is very manageable in comparison to some other Penn State schedules that the Nittany Lions have had, especially in conference in recent years. Another coaching change, it'll become official on Tuesday when UCLA introduces former James Madison head man Bob Chesney. Now, it became official in word, according to UCLA, over the weekend. The introduction is scheduled for Tuesday afternoon. We'll bring it to you here on the Big Ten Network. This is kind of Curt Cignetti 2.0. At least that's what UCLA hopes. And not just because Chesney replaced Sig at James Madison, but because you look at his coaching career. Prior to this, he was at Holy Cross, an FCS program, at Assumption College, Division II. He worked his way up at even smaller schools than that before starting his head coaching career. But like Cignetti, like Campbell, a guy who at all of these stops has done nothing but win.
And I think that's the critical part of it, right? You're a winner. You're bringing a winner into the program, a proven guy that can build a roster, that understands that there are going to be some challenges wherever you are, but was able to make the most of them. And I think they continue to do that. And you also take it a step further with the portal openings, right? So he has an opportunity to really be able to go out and identify the players that he's going to need to bring into the fold. I think one of the great things when you start to think about coaches that have to really work their way up is the fact that they have to evaluate talent much differently, because they don't have the resources that some of the bigger places did. Coach Campbell alluded to that. You have to be on top of your evaluations. And I think when you look at what Indiana has been done, their evaluation process is unbelievable. Now, when you've played at and worked at some lower levels, you have to be able to do that. And I think we'll see that at Penn State, and I think we'll also see that now at UCLA.
Chesney will stay with James Madison for the Duke's playoff run, which of course begins in the first round against Oregon. A lot of coaches on those sidelines can have plane tickets, because you start to think about what Oregon is dealing with. First, we heard about Will Stein, the OC, considered one of the hot young coaching commodities in the entire business, returning home to coach Kentucky. Then a few days later, Tosh Lupoy, the defensive coordinator of Oregon, named the coach in waiting at Cal. Now, they'll both stick with Dan Lanning for the entirety, but these are big-time jobs. We were talking Power 4 jobs that these two coaches are inheriting. So, those fan bases will be rooting against Oregon. They, meanwhile, need to pull double duty to get the Ducks as much as they can get them through the college football playoff.
And they've been able to see it. And you think about Coach Lanning, he's seen this happen because he was at Alabama. He's been at Georgia. He's seen when assistant coaches have to go make a big jump. Maybe not necessarily at the head coaching position, but you understand what being able to delegate and compartmentalize the different situations that have to go on. But again, these are great opportunities for all of these coordinators to be able to take that next jump, but they also have a chance to be able to finish things up with their current employer, and I think that's going to really help those teams be able to move forward.
And listen, with Lupoy, much like we talk about with Brian Hartline leaving, you have Ryan Day, a play caller. With Lupoy leaving, you have no worries about the defense with Dan Lanning. I mean, Dan Lanning cut his teeth as a defensive guy. Obviously, the work that he did with Kirby Smart at Georgia, we all know what that led to. I think the bigger questions are on the offensive side, but man, this offense has been absolutely cooking, and you know that Will Stein wants to take as much of that momentum as he can back to Lexington when he starts to work full-time as the Kentucky head coach. All right, Howard, good news. It is almost time for us to bust out the ugly shoes. We are going bowling after the break. A look at the 9 other postseason matches on the Big Ten schedule when we come back, including terrific showdowns for the likes of Michigan, Illinois, and Iowa. 9, count them, 9 Big Ten teams going bowling outside the CFP, and bowl season for the league actually starts this weekend. December 13th, that's the LA Bowl for Boise State and Washington. Northwestern heads to Detroit to take on Central Michigan. Minnesota at the Rate Bowl against New Mexico. New York City in the Pinstripe Bowl matching up Penn State and Clemson. Two teams didn't have the seasons they expected. Tennessee and Illinois in the Music City Bowl. USC makes its first ever trip to the Alamo Bowl to take on TCU. The ReliaQuest Bowl, a spicy matchup between Vandy and Iowa. Michigan v. Texas in the Citrus Bowl. Nebraska heads to Vegas to take on Utah in the SRS Distribution Vegas Bowl. Howard, let's dive into a couple of these marquee matchups, starting with Michigan, Texas, two of the most touted freshman quarterbacks in the country. You have Bryce Underwood, you have Arch Manning, you have two of the most storied programs in college football history. Outside of the CFP, I would argue this is probably the bowl game that the nation finds the most interesting.
Yeah, you talked about a headline game. This is exactly that for what you mentioned when you look at the quarterbacks, and they're going to get a lot of the credit and a lot of the hype coming into this game. But I think this is an opportunity when you look at both of these teams who have outstanding defensive players that are game wreckers. It'll be interesting to see just how many guys that are draft eligible decide to stay a part of this and go out and compete. But this is a great game when you look at the rosters and you look at just what these programs, both from their perspective, underachieved this year, but but this is an opportunity for them to even get better and really feel good about how the season ultimately ends.
Listen, Sharon Moore and the Wolverines went 9-3. By most measures, at most schools, that's a pretty good year. But the year ended with a loss to Ohio State for the first time since 2019 and no Big Ten championship game appearance. So saving the season is absolutely the wrong term. It's not as if the season has to be saved, but this could be a huge add. And what a momentum boost heading into next year for Moore and company if they're able to knock off the 13th ranked team in the country.
Yeah, I think we always talk about the 15 practices for bowl preparation and be able to do that. Also, the fact that you can have recruits around, an opportunity, the recruits to see what your program is ultimately about. But this is a chance, no doubt, for Bryce Underwood to continue to improve. For me, it's about the passing game. Can they start to get that going in the right direction? Can the timing get right? Can the mechanics get right? It's no question what type of player he is and just how good he will be and can be, but he has to go out and get that done on the football field. To be able to get those extra 15 practices will be critical for him, and I think when you start to look forward to next year, this is the way Michigan really wants to start to move forward and get that passing game going.
And where will Michigan be health-wise in the run game? Jordan Marshall banged up late in the year. Justice Haynes didn't play the second half of the year. Sharon Moore had said a few weeks back he may be ready for a bowl game. That's also a situation where he may say, even if I'm ready, I'm not so sure I'm ready to play in the bowl game. Obviously, all those stories still to come.
Another under-the-radar, Kerry Coombs. Back in coaching,
special teams coordinator for Michigan now.
Boy,
after
Michigan
a long
fans,
time at Ohio State.
Man, you guys should be hyped about this one. That's going to be a great hire for him.
So I know the nation loves Michigan, Texas. I love this matchup for Iowa against Vanderbilt. In case you didn't see Vandy this year, Diego Pavia, certainly a Heisman contender, one of the more electric quarterbacks, overall players really in the nation. Eli Stauer is a terrific tight end, is going to be a high draft pick. Clark Lee has done things with Vanderbilt close to the level of what Curt Cignetti has done at Indiana, because it's a program that historically has not really done much. And this Vandy offense against Phil Parker and the Iowa defense, that is a matchup to watch.
That is it's so great when you start to think about it, because Vandy does some creative things. And really, when you talk about Pavia, he is really what makes this team go. And he's the difference in having him on the football field. And he's going to be electric for them. But to watch the matchup, as you just mentioned, when you think about Iowa, doesn't want to give up big plays, wants to really control the running game, this is going to be a fantastic matchup. And I think this is one of the matchups we're going to see a full roster of players. And I don't think you're going to see guys opting out of this particular game, and one of the reasons being just what these head coaches mean, and they want to finish up the right way.
Known as the ReliaQuest Bowl. It used to be the Outback Bowl. We always joked around, death, taxes, and Iowa going to the Outback Bowl. Tampa loves the Hawkeyes, and they get the Hawkeyes again this year. Terrific matchup against Vanderbilt. What about Illinois? I know at the beginning of the year, and I respect Brett Bielema so much for coming out and saying, listen, our aspirations this year are get to the college football playoff. They don't get to the college football playoff. They still had an 8-win season. All of their losses, save one, would be considered, quote, quality losses. But to not have the opportunity to get to 10 is disappointing. If you can get to 9 and you can beat Tennessee in Nashville, that's another huge feather in the cap.
Yeah, that would be a great ball game as well. When you think about, for Illinois, it's really about continuing to develop and be consistent. That's what it comes down to for this program, because it's a developmental program and they'll continue to get better. I know they will under Brett Bielema, but this is just another step. I like the matchup, because I don't think that Tennessee is going to give a lot of credit or respect to Illinois. So this is one of those games where Illinois can have an opportunity to go out and beat an SEC opponent like they did last year and really have some momentum going into next season.
Now, both these teams are also interesting in the sense that they both have draft-eligible guys who are going to be fairly high picks. So, again, we will get news between now and December 30th that some guys are deciding to opt out and prepare for the NFL draft. It's just a matter of who those guys are and how big of an impact they could have on this game.
You're absolutely right, but those are decisions those young men have to make with their families, and they've done all that they could do at the university, and if they feel like the best interest of them to be able to go and get prepared for the next level, you can't begrudge them that.
No, absolutely not. Once this became an option in this day and age of college football, if you're going to be a first or second round NFL draft pick, put yourself in those players' shoes. Then start to criticize if they decide not to play and risk getting hurt and losing their spot in the draft. The Big Ten still has 5 teams alive and swinging in the NCAA women's volleyball tournament, including #1 overall seed Nebraska, which ran roughshod through its first 2 rounds. failing to lose a single set. Purdue, Wisconsin, also among those still playing in their quest for an NCAA national title. AP has recently released both the men's and women's top 25 basketball polls. Michigan is number 2 in all the land. Purdue dropping all the way down to number 6 after being beaten handily by Iowa State at home on Saturday. Michigan State stays inside the top 10 despite its loss to Duke. Illinois up a tick after its weekend win over Tennessee. Nebraska makes it inside the top 25. They are joined by UCLA. In the world of women's hoops, there are 9 Big Ten teams inside the top 25. Paced by 3 inside the top 10, UCLA, Michigan, and Maryland. Inside that top 10, Iowa just outside. USC, Washington, Ohio State, Nebraska, and Michigan State make up the rest of the Big Ten's representation inside the women's basketball top 25.
3rd down and 8 at the 17. Becker's been a go-to man as well. Mendoza, fade, Surratt, corner, touchdown, Indiana!
That was the only touchdown the Hoosiers would need. Elijah Surratt finally healthy, getting back into the end zone. Charlie Becker was huge, and that Indiana defense came up in the most critical moments as IU locks up its first Big Ten championship since 1967 and now sits at number 1 in the country for the first time in program history. The reward, a January 1st CFP quarterfinal at the Rose Bowl. It'll be Indiana against either Alabama or Oklahoma. Ohio State is the number 2 national seed. They'll open things up on New Year's Eve in the Cotton Bowl at a quarterfinal against either Miami or Texas A&M. Oregon plays a first-round game against James Madison. That is inside Autzen Stadium, scheduled for Saturday, December the 20th. Howard, as we start to look ahead to the CFP, you think about what Indiana has already accomplished. You add in the fact that Fernando Mendoza is about to be named the Heisman Trophy winner. So no matter what happens from here on out, this has been an historic season for Indiana. And yet there's no chance in the world that Curt Cignetti is allowing his team to think that way.
Yeah, and all that they've accomplished, whether it's individual goals, I think they'll have the Broyles Award winner for the best assistant coach, and Coach Haynes, the defensive coordinator. So there are a lot of awards that this Indiana team is going to attain over the next couple of weeks. But the biggest thing they are doing, they are focused on trying to win a national championship. And it's going to be the first game they have to play, and getting prepared for that and understanding that. But this is a team, as we've said all year, understands what the standard is and continues to rise to that level each and every week.
And it's another challenge for Cignetti and this staff, a challenge they've probably never been through before at any level, because when you're in the FCS, you get more quickly into the playoffs. Now it is going to be a long wait. You're talking about a championship game on December 6th. Now Indiana's not going to play another football game until January 1.
Yeah, a lot of time. A lot of time goes, but that's also an opportunity for them to get healthy and also to be able to do some self-scout and scout future opponents as well. So I'm sure that they're going to use this time wisely, and if we know Coach Cignetti, he will have this team prepared.
Now, Ohio State has been through this before, though a year ago when the Buckeyes went on their run because of the loss to Michigan, they did have to play a first-round game, and I still contend that benefited Ohio State because they didn't have to wait as long, and they got right back to it. They had Tennessee and that rabid fan base, and they just ran them out of the building, and they continued that momentum the entire way through the college football playoff. A little bit different this year. You come off a loss that you have to now sit on until December 31st.
But I'll say this about this team, and one of the things, particularly the veterans, the leadership of this program at Ohio State, they wanted to set their own path. They wanted this year to be about them, not what happened last year. Sure, they were a part of a national championship last year, but they wanted to put their fingerprints all over this team, and they've done it to this point. But now's the time to really be able to take that next step to become a national championship starts today.
And I like the draw with Texas A&M or Miami at the Cotton Bowl. Then you would potentially move on to a semifinal if the seeds hold. That would be against Georgia in the Fiesta Bowl. Of course, a couple of years ago, we saw that unbelievable semifinal between Ohio State and Georgia in the Peach Bowl, where a missed field goal, Buckeye fans don't really want to hear that right now, was the difference. And lastly, we get to see Oregon starting early in the first round at home, and to me, that's the biggest story here. Autzen is the most unbelievable environment in all of college football, and it gets to host a playoff game at night, by the way, in December.
Yeah, an opportunity, right? You talk about a fan base that is really just out of their minds when it comes to their program in their stadium environment. Now to be able to do that for a playoff game, something that hasn't happened for them at home. This is going to be, I think, an unbelievable environment, but again, gives this Oregon team an opportunity to hopefully get a little healthier than they are now. But this is also an Oregon team that plays a lot of young people throughout the year that have had opportunities to step up, and they'll be able to rely upon some of those young guys to be able to lead this team this weekend.
Let's talk about the moments that define these three teams this year. We'll transition right where we are right now with Oregon. To me, it's not one singular moment as much as it is the way this team responded after that loss to Indiana, despite all the injuries, to have such a strong back end to their regular season.
No question about it. I think when you start to look at this Oregon team, there were still questions that they needed to address. To me, one of them was on the defensive line, being able to create negative plays. They started to get that done really the second half of the year, and I thought that really showed outstanding coaching and also understanding what the weaknesses are to be able to take advantage of. Again, had outstanding quarterback play for the entire year. So when you talk about the teams that are in this situation, that are in the playoffs, you only need to look under center for a lot of them to get an understanding that they're going to be in every game because of the skill sets of those quarterbacks.
What about Ohio State, a team that wasn't really tested a ton this year? Was the moment that shaped this team all the way back in week one when we learned just how good this defense would be with not just one but multiple goal line stands against then #1 Texas?
Yeah, I think we found out a lot about this team and really just who they were ultimately going to be this year and what the scheme changes were going to be. So we really saw a team that I thought made some great moves. For me, I never really talked about the scheme, but I talked about matchups. They create matchups from a defensive standpoint that makes it very difficult for offenses to be able to really be able to thrive and be consistent. Although Indiana was able to make some big plays on some big play talent that Ohio State has, this is a team that I think the defense is really what's going to lead this team to the next level and winning a national title because there's so much talent over there. I think they can really dictate the pace of the game for their opponents.
And I think you're right. I think Brian Haynes, the IU defensive coordinator, will be the Broyles Award winner as the nation's top assistant. But Matt Patricia, the DC for Ohio State, he's not going to be far behind if he isn't the guy who actually holds up that award at year's end. And finally, for Indiana, it wasn't just one. There were so many memorable moments. You had the comeback against Iowa, the trip to Eugene, but obviously, Howard, the moment that will resonate with all IU fans. Take nothing away from the championship win because it's a championship. But I'm not sure we're having that conversation if Omar Cooper doesn't make one of the greatest catches you've ever seen in the back of the end zone to lead IU back and beat Penn State.
An incredible catch. But what was bigger was the moment that surrounded the catch, as you just mentioned. Thought it was outstanding. And when you go back and I think about really that entire drive, Fernando Mendoza was rushed and hurried in that drive. And he wasn't playing always his best. But when he needed to come up with the big play at that moment, he threw it to Cooper, who was probably not open, but made an unbelievable catch. Really speaks to the trust that they have in one another and from a quarterback to a wide receiver.
Fernando told me when I interviewed him earlier this week, you're told to throw it where only your receiver can catch it. He admitted that he threw it a little bit higher than he wanted. And we'll close with this, the moment of seeing Curt Cignetti on the podium accepting the Big Ten championship trophy.
Yeah, you talk about setting goals. You talk about, what your goals, obviously a national championship, but there are steps to it. Winning a Big Ten title helps you get there. So Coach Cignetti has done an amazing job over his coaching career and finally getting the credit he ultimately deserves.
And they are just steps toward a national championship. Programming note, Tuesday, 1:30 Eastern, 10:30 local time, introductory press conference of UCLA head coach Bob Chesney.